Jackie Todd, Jackie Todd. Can we just take our clothes off? We all have to show them we're tough. The bare chested horseback ride is played in the
Oh, yes. Horseback ride is the best.
We're going to show what our peps.
What do you make of this exchange? Was this banter or political messaging? G7 leaders talking about flexing their muscle. Quick history. A few years back, they were called the G8, Group of 8. Russia was the 8th member. In 2014, it took Crimea. So they expelled Russia and called themselves the G7 or Group of 7. Now in 2022, Russia has invaded Ukraine and China has closed ranks with it. So G7 has to deal with a combined threat, the threat of the China-Russia axis. How are they going to do that? They're sanctioning Russia. They're also reviving an old mission. The G7 wants to challenge China's most ambitious project, the Belt and Road Initiative or BRI. They've announced a new plan. It's called the Global Investment and Infrastructure Partnership. The Global Investment and Infrastructure Partnership. The name is self-explanatory. They'll fund infra projects around the world, and for this they've promised money. How much money? $600 billion. Is it old wine in a new bottle, or are the G7 leaders on to something? On Gravitas tonight, that's what we'll discuss. We'll bring you an assessment. First things first, this is not new. They've rebranded and watered down an old plan. You might remember this. Last year, the G7 announced something similar. They called it the Build Back Better World. B3W. Build Back Better World. I'm sure it sounds familiar. Build Back Better was Joe Biden's campaign slogan. In 2021, he took it to the G7. They talked about a $40 trillion plan, 4-0. The US president wanted to lead it, but the US Congress punctured the proposal. It never took off. So this year, Biden went to Germany with a new proposal, a scaled-down version of Build Back Better World. From 40 trillion, they've come down to 600 billion.
Collectively, we aim to mobilize nearly $600 billion from the G7 by 2027. These strategic investments are areas of critical to sustainable development and to our shared global stability. Health and health security, digital connectivity, gender equality and equity, climate and energy security.
From 40 trillion to 600 billion. The last plan was supposed to finance infrastructure projects till 2035. What about the new one? The G7 will raise $600 billion to be spent over the next 5 years. Where will this money go? To middle and low-income countries. The funds will finance projects in 4 categories: climate change, global health, digital infrastructure, and achieving gender equality. How will this money be raised? The US will give $200 billion, the European Union $300 billion, the remaining $100 billion will come from G7 members, the other members. Some projects have already been announced. They're being called flagship projects. One of them is a sea cable linking Europe with Southeast Asia. These are communication lines. Then we have a solar power project in Angola, a vaccine plant in Senegal, a modular nuclear reactor plant in Romania, and a port linking Christmas Islands with the rest of the world. These islands are in external territory of Australia. There are plans for clear energy partnerships as well. One of them is being rolled out in South Africa. Vietnam, Senegal, Indonesia, and India could be next. How does this compare with China's Belt and Road Initiative? Let's look at the numbers. The G7 is committing $600 billion for the next 5 years. You know how much China spent on the Belt and Road? At least $4 trillion. 600 billion, 4 trillion. And Beijing is still spending. Every year, China spends at least $85 billion on BRI. So the G7's plan does not even come close. Of course, they did not mention China, but they left no doubt about who or what they're trying to counter. Look at their sales pitch. It has China written all over it. The G7 is making this about democracies and autocracies.
As the global economy was just recovering, Russia's vicious attack on Ukraine happened, driving prices up, everywhere from food to energy, and casting deep uncertainty, especially in the most fragile countries. These are very severe challenges. We will tackle them head-on, and this is why G7 partners are gathered here. But this must not, and it will not, divert us away from our affirmative agenda. To show the world that democracies, when they work together, provide the single best path to deliver results for our people and people all over the world.
The messaging is good, but we've heard it before. To counter China's rise, the world needs an alternative, a better alternative, a sustainable alternative, which is all very well. But such alternatives need money, and that's exactly why Build Back Better World did not take off. The US and its allies could not raise the funds. How will they get the $600 billion they've promised now? There's no clarity yet. The United States says it wants to get this money from different places: grants, federal funds, and private investment. On the European side, there's a lack of coordination. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz suggested there is confusion behind the scenes. He said the G7 should make a single consolidated plan.
We have therefore discussed how our investment globally in climate neutral and low carbon energy, including gas, can help us as a temporary response to Russia's use of energy as a weapon. Given the progress we have achieved, time is ripe to showcase our offer to the world under a common roof. I'm convinced the G7 makes a stronger, better and more convincing offer to partners globally. But beyond steps we have been taken, this is a long-term undertaking.
This is a long-term undertaking, he says. Data validates the German Chancellor's concerns. Look at how much G7 countries spend on development assistance, 0.32% of their gross national income. Earlier, they'd committed to spending 0.7%, so less than 50% of the target. It's not even 1% of their income, meaning the G7 do not spend on development assistance, and there is no willingness to change that. So even if they cobble up the $600 billion that they are now talking about, competing with China's BRI will still remain a pipe dream. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.